Hello everyone, welcome to From the Star Wars Library, where Star Wars is in print, the Force is with the readers, and we return to 1982 to get Luke finally off the hook in this episode. I'm your host, as always, Nathan P. Butler. The issues we're looking at this time are from the Marvel series. We are looking at issue number 65, Golroth Never Forgets. It says Luke Skywalker stands trial for treason and Leia fights alone. Golroth never forgets. That little screen behind her says, reactor critical, 60 seconds to meltdown. Kind of cool there. We then have issue number 66, the second part of the story, though it's only loosely tied together, entitled The Water Bandits, with nothing written there on the cover as far as any flavor text or anything like that. Now, I've mentioned this before, that when I ran into some of these, I would show you signed copies if I had them. This is actually one. It's the last of the three that I have that's signed by Walt Simonson. This is a story in both issues written by David Michelinie with art by Walt Simonson and Tom Palmer. Kind of depends on which issue you're looking at. He's credited, Walt Simonson that is credited as the plot and storyteller of issue number 65, whereas David Michelinie is credited with plot and script, and then Tom Palmer with pencils and inks. Okay? And then you have The Water Bandits, though, which has David Michelinie as the writer, Tom Palmer as the finished art, and Walt Simonson as breakdowns, which I'm assuming is referring to breakdowns of the art, not break it down kind of stuff. Suffice to say there, signed again by Walt Simonson, the last of those three for me. You can find this these days as one of the last stories, but not the last story, in Star Wars Omnibus A Long Time Ago, Volume 3. You can also find it in black and white form, but only The Water Bandits, not Golroth Never Forgets, in the prestige format, Classic Star Wars A Long Time Ago, Volume 3. This is the same issue that has Resurrection of Evil, To Take the Tarkin, and Shira's story, so we have now finished out the issues in Volume 3 here. Now, you may recall that at the end of issue number 63, The Mind Spider, Luke was still a pariah. They'd had the whole incident where they went after the Teasel and that armada led by Admiral Geel, who has now been demoted in this issue to Lieutenant, not Lieutenant, but for the next few issues they're going to repeatedly say Lieutenant in a non-American English sort of way, which is a little bit odd for Marvel publishing these for the first time in the United States, but I guess I digress here just a little bit. Suffice to say, he had destroyed the ship with the Teasel on it, but in the process wound up killing Shira Bree. He went through the whole process of being considered a traitor, escaping with the Millennium Falcon, him and Chewbacca, going to find the proof that Shira really was a traitor. The Force didn't steer him wrong in killing her. He then has that information. He was heading back at the end of that story to go clear his name. Then, of course, in issue number 64, Luke is on a mission for the Rebellion again. He apparently showed up, and Leia sent him and two other pilots on a brief mission where one of them died, and one of them almost got eaten, and now Luke and her, the one who survived, are on their way back. So we have that odd sort of filler story there that makes it seem as though Luke must have somehow gotten a special mission from Leia right upon returning because maybe they weren't ready for the trial or something. Just a little bit weird. But of course none of that's mentioned because they were going to jump from the issue before it where Luke found the information to this one where it's used in his trial with that filler issue unfortunately tossed in between. Suffice to say, Luke begins on trial in Golroth Never Forgets. And very, very quickly, within the span of just basically 2.5 pages. Luke is cleared of all charges. He's shown the information, shown the proof that Shira really was a traitor, an Imperial spy in their ranks. He's okay, he's cleared, he's ready to go back to duty. So Luke is cleared, but a new crisis emerges. You see, they had abandoned their base on Golroth back in the Crimson Forever, right? Issue number 50. Problem now is what they're realizing is that the crystals, the rocks, that Golroth is made of, that the planet is made of, essentially, when they're heated, it absorbs light rays and such from around it. And then as it cools, it releases those light rays again in the same way they were taken in. And I kid you not, it basically turns essentially what is supposed to be just a rock into sort of a glorified hologram projector type of thing. Like this whole rebel army scene here, as I duck down, that whole rebel army there is all being projected on a wall by the rocks of that wall. Not a good thing here. It's an accident. They didn't realize this was the case. The problem is that the planet is slowly cooling, and that means that if the Empire goes and checks out that old base that they know is there, thanks to Domina Tag, they're going to have all kinds of intel about the Rebel Alliance. They need to get there and destroy the caverns and stuff around their old base, and they need to do it fast. So they take off, and right, there was all that hubbub for a while about Leia being a pilot in the upcoming Star Wars with no subtitles series that's supposed to launch early in 2013. But here's Leia in pilot garb. So she's flying with the starfighters as they go back to Golroth. Only apparently she's inside a Y-wing with Lando because Lando continues flying along and she gets dropped with a jetpack. Now, how does she change clothes from pilot garb to this while sitting inside a Y-wing? I can only assume that it's one of those giant Y-wings that somehow fit like 10 people in it that we tend to see a lot in the Marvel series. It doesn't really fit with what we see in the films or elsewhere in the expanded universe. Suffice to say, Leia knows what to do. She drops down into the base. She sneaks her way through the base, fights Gil briefly, makes her way to the reactor, and sets it up to explode. And then it's just up to her to manage to escape, as Gil is willing to essentially die to reclaim his honor. He's inside as it blows up. She gets picked up on a cable by Lando in a Y-wing, who zips her away to safety. The problem is, as it explodes, some of the pistol shots that the Imperials use as they're flying away, some of the Imperials are like pew, 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 right? P-E-W, pew, pew, at the X-Wings. Some of the shots must have done some good, because as everybody else jumps to hyperspace, which, and this up here, that's their version of everybody jumps to hyperspace, Luke is left behind. And he's going to have to sit down on the planet Behemoth to save his butt from the Imperials who are pursuing him. So we get sort of a cliffhanger here of what's going to happen to Luke, but the mission to Golroth is done, right? Golroth never forgets. Golroth isn't a person, it's the planet. The planet never forgets because it takes in the light rays and can then repeat out whatever it takes in. An interesting concept. Not sure how much it makes a whole lot of sense any more than the way that Han Solo in Shadeshine, which is annual number 2, records his voice for future people to learn what happened to the Satab on Ventuine, is to speak into the rocks, and the rocks record the vibrations and play them back. These are some funky rocks in the Star Wars universe, that's all I'm saying. Suffice to say, a story that lends us to a cliffhanger which then picks up in The Water Bandits. So we come to issue 66, The Water Bandits, and I kind of like the fact that this one, the cover and the first page there are very, very similar. I like the symmetry there between those two. You don't usually see that a lot in Star Wars publishing. Usually the cover is only vaguely representative of what's inside, if at all, especially in the ongoing series where you see sort of the same concepts being reused over and over again. Suffice to say, Luke, with his damaged X-Wing, is set down on the planet Behemoth. And the idea is that he needs provisions. So he goes to Garantine, one of these nearby towns, and they get onto him because he's an outsider and such. It's a planet that does not have much in the way of water. They've got these different moisture farms, kind of like Tatooine, and some of the evaporators are being attacked. It looks like these pirates, these bandits, have been going around somehow stealing all the water from people's evaporators and destroying them to kind of, get a stranglehold on that market for water. Pretty much everybody's been hit by this except for a woman named Dariel Anglethorne, who happens to step in, that's her right there, happens to step in to protect Luke when the locals get ready to beat him up, thinking that he must be someone who's in league with those who have been ripping them off. She briefly offers Luke some aid, a chance to work on her moisture farm while he's looking for supplies and such, though, of course, it's only temporary. He winds up going back with her, and the idea is that maybe he can somehow see what's going on, sense what's going on, use the Force maybe even to figure out how the pirates are getting into places and stealing the water, how they are hurting everyone or knocking everyone out to get to the water, and then maybe he can set things right before the Alliance eventually shows up to take him back into the fold. Instead, the first night that they stay out, they're like, something happens. And Luke is sensing it, a voice in his head through the Force telling him, we do what we must, we wish you no harm, do not fear, and and he's out, just like everybody else, and sure enough wakes up, and everything has been attacked. They wind up going to the bandits' base, tracking it back, and it's a man by the name of Gideon Longspear, who has this thing. We had the Tizzle, or the Teasel before. Here we have the Tirith. And the Tirith, a lot like the snow, I guess, in the recent Doctor Who Christmas special, the snowmen, that's smaller on the outside. We have this interesting kind of globe here full of these weird greenish particles. That is the Tirith. It's sort of a hive mind type of thing. What's been happening is that because so much of the Tirith, I keep wanting to say Teasel, so much of the Tirith is held in that sphere, the pirate Longspear is able to send out other particles, and those particles go out into the moisture evaporators, and when they go through the evaporators, it sends out a noxious gas that knocks everybody out, at which point the pirates just walk in, take whatever they want. Only the Tirith doesn't want to be there any more than Luke and Daryl do once they have been captured. So it comes in, it helps distract the guards. Luke uses the Force to get them out of their cell. He runs back in, winds up actually dueling with Longspear, who is using, or fighting with Longspear, who is using Luke's lightsaber, having noted that he hadn't seen one since the wars, presumably the Clone Wars. And in the fight that ensues, they break open the Teasel's, see, I did it again, the Tirith's tank. Now, there's just way too many T's with the repeated letters kind of stuff in the Marvel stuff right now for weird alien concepts here. They break it open. The particles are able to run free. The only way to stop all the pirates, people who are heading out to hurt them, all these water bandits heading in to harm Luke and Daryl, is to bust open all of the water containers that have been gathered from all the evaporators from the pirates. They break them open. It freaks Daryl out because she's on a planet. She's never seen so much water in one place, and now they're just letting it run into the ground to sweep away the bandits' operation. Only things still turn out well. Essentially, the Tirith is saying, trust us, this will turn out okay. Just as Luke is about to leave, having now fixed the X-Wing so he can escape, the Tirith goes up into the clouds, essentially seeds them, and it rains on the planet for the first time in a very, very long while. Things on Behemoth are going to be okay, and Luke is going to rejoin the rebellion. A nice kind of personal little story. Again, an odd alien concept here, putting the sci-fi heavily into Star Wars here, the sci-fi fantasy. But a decent little story, and it gives us a way of tying those two pieces together with Luke's X-Wing being damaged, and gives us a nice ending there at the beginning there with the trial back in Goldrock Never Forgets to wrap up that whole storyline with Shira and whatnot, and yet not be bogged down on it so they can be propelled in a new direction. We are getting very close to when they're going to be actively searching for Han Solo leading up to Return of the Jedi. So, is this story, Goldrock Never Forgets and The Water Bandits, an essential read? That kind of depends. I'm going to argue that the stories in and of themselves, the main storylines are not essential. However, you probably ought to read that first 2.5, 3 pages to get the end of the story with the trial of Luke Skywalker after seeing everything with Shira beforehand. If you can live with just assuming, well, yeah, Luke, of course, gets off okay because he got the data, then you don't need to read those first few pages. But if you want the full breadth and scope of that Shira storyline that Michelinie was leading us through, and then Simonson came in and assisted in leading us through recently, then yeah, you probably should read those first few pages. With that, we'll wrap up this episode. Thank you for watching, and may the Force be with the readers.